One of the main goals of the HBO series Beyond Book Accuracy is Wizarding World expansion. The series itself is already set to explore themes that we never got to see in the films, and HBO have hinted that we should be expecting more. So, what spin-offs should we be expecting? What subplots deserve to be explored further? And what characters can we expect to get to know better? Keep watching for all of this and more. Welcome, wizards, witches, muggles, and squibs, back to Spellbuzz. I'm your host, Francesca Williams, and in this video, we're going to be analysing rumours, theories, and possibilities of a Harry Potter spin-off series. Let's start with why we even think there's going to be a spin-off in the first place. It's quite simple, really. Warner Brothers Discovery executive J.B. Perrette hinted that the series could grow well beyond the traditional material. And he also said they're aiming for 10 years of the Harry Potter series. And to me, that sounds like they're going to branch off in a few different directions. We also know that in January of 2024, HBO were rumoured, well, the talk of the town was that HBO were open to developments. So that sounds very promising, does it not? I think it's also important to note that HBO are already kind of doing this with the series. There seems to be a link between the Hogwarts Legacy video game and the Harry Potter series. I mentioned this in my last video, but there's a few areas where they could make links between professors and things that happen in the Hogwarts Legacy video game that could be mentioned in the series. So that is another point of Wizarding World expansion. While it is important to note that HBO haven't officially confirmed a spin-off, it's quite likely. And as we know from their previous Harry Potter announcements, they like to have everything up and running and crystal clear before they make any announcements at all, really. To me, I think there's definitely a possibility. Now, J.K. Rowling's role in this as executive producer is really, really important, as without her, it could completely fall apart. She is the one there making sure that her ideas and her baby, Harry Potter, stays exactly how she wants it. And if she does do any spin-offs, she'll be the first one dictating the choices of the characters, the sets, and everything like that. Most likely, she'll be the writer, right? Now, it's also important to note that HBO have done this before with Game of Thrones. Now, Game of Thrones is said to be one of the biggest series in the past 10 to 15 years, and HBO have had many a spin-off with them. They had a prequel, which was a multi-season series, and that is House of the Dragon, and this is one of their most popular spin-offs. They also then did a mini-series, which is A Knight of Seven Kingdoms, and that's a story of Dunk and Egg. And then finally, they're rumoured to be doing a film too. This is quite interesting for us as Harry Potter fans hoping for a spin-off, because it shows us that the spin-off may not just be another series. It could be any form of multimedia. So it could be a mini-series, a series, or even a film, which I think there's a lot of potential for a film. Even though I know Fantastic Beasts didn't do that well, there is still a lot of love for films in fandoms, as we know that with Hunger Games, fans go crazy every time a new prequel or follow-on is released. I think with Harry Potter, they've just got to get it right. If you do like deep dives into Harry Potter lore and content, there is plenty more videos on our channel, so go and check those out. Now we've had a little look at why and how they may do a spin-off, let's have a look at possible topics. Now, I think the first one is one of the more obvious ones, and that is Dumbledore and Grindelwald's youth. Now, this is something that may also be explored in Season 7 when we look at the Deathly Hallows and the Elder Wand, and obviously how the Elder Wand passes from one person to the next. Now, I think the topics they would cover would be Dumbledore and Grindelwald's relationships, their for the greater good mentality, but also the tragic story of Dumbledore's sister Ariana as well. I also hope they would include Dumbledore and Grindelwald's duel, because that to me is something that is crazy that that's not been explored, because it's known as one of the greatest duels in wizarding history, and yet we know very little about it. Although a lot of this was also explored within Fantastic Beasts, but not very well. And I think the problem was there is Fantastic Beasts was originally supposed to be about the magical creatures, but straight off the bat we had Grindelwald's rise, and in the end it just became about Grindelwald. So I really think that it should, if they do it, they need to strip that completely back and just go into Dumbledore and Grindelwald and their relationship, and also the Wizarding War. I think that's something that's also very important to touch on, because obviously at the same time you had the Muggle War, World War II, and that was part of Grindelwald's reasoning for wanting to basically dominate the Muggles was because he saw a vision of the nuclear bombs that came from World War II, and he said they have to be stopped, essentially. So I think there's a lot of room for exploration because they clearly already have a lot of subject matter, and J.K. Rowling wouldn't have to do too much because she can pull from all of the other sources. But equally, Fantastic Beasts was a flop. So it really depends if they choose to do it well, but in my opinion, I think it would be flogging a dead horse, or so they say. Although I do like the fact that Fantastic Beasts touched on the Wizarding World in America, and I'll come back to that in a minute, because that's something I think that they could also expand and would be very interesting. Now, I think if they did do a Grindelwald v Dumbledore series, it would be a series. I don't think it would be a film, as I think there is just too much content and it's quite complicated. I especially felt that watching Fantastic Beasts. I kind of didn't know where I was. There was too many new concepts introduced to me, so I really do think it would have to be a series and just break it up by seasons. But yes, as I say, I don't know how well it would do. And that moves me on to my next one, which is one that I think would do much better, and that is the founders of Hogwarts. Now, I think this topic could really be beneficial because something that I see so often, which I personally can't relate to because I am a Gryffindor, but for other people who are Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs, or even Slytherins, even though they do have a lot of content on their house, is the fact that it's really lacking in their house content, their house merch, and all of the things basically surrounding their way into Hogwarts, you know? So for me, as a Gryffindor, I see a lot about the dorm rooms and the setup, and I know a lot about my house, but I feel like for Hufflepuff and Ravenclaws, they just don't have that. So I think a Founders of Hogwarts series, film, or mini-series could be really, really helpful for that. And it would really make fans feel even more immersed into the world of Harry Potter. It's a great way to just make the world more immersive and expand it. Now, if they did do it, I think they would probably focus on the story of the founders building Hogwarts, and also obviously on Salazar Slytherin's choice to not want to let Muggleborns in, because I think that is obviously a key point that can then link back to season 2 of the original series, as in the Chamber of Secrets, the whole thing about the basilisk is Salazar Slytherin and his heir setting it free. However, saying that, I do think there would be so much room to grow with this, as I think they could also really branch out into the other houses, into Helga Hufflepuff's cup, into Godric Gryffindor's sword, and the fact that the goblin who forged it originally then wanted it back, because I think that's really interesting, especially how significant the sword is for the Harry Potter series as well. And then in terms of Ravenclaw, they have a lot of room to grow there, because they could talk about Rowena Ravenclaw, but they could also talk about Helena Ravenclaw and also the Bloody Baron and that whole story there as well. And then the Ravenclaw diadem, which really nicely sets it up for Voldemort finding the diadem and, you know, putting a Horcrux in it, which is not great, but I think that would set it up nicely. And from there, if they chose to, but it would be going a little bit too deep, I think, because there are more topics to explore that would possibly be more important. They could also really delve into the ghosts of Hogwarts, because if you think, right, then we've got Helena Ravenclaw, Grey Lady, we also have the Bloody Baron, all explained then. We can even do people like Nearly Headless Nick, we could do Peeves, you could do the poltergeists and the ghosts backstories, and I think that would be something that people would love to just immerse themselves into Hogwarts. And I really think, you know, you have Universal Studios in Orlando, and that's the whole Harry Potter world. The more you develop Hogwarts and the concept of it, the more content you have everywhere else. They could really do some good developments there. They could even build like Thorns even, and you can go in and see them, and I think that would definitely be very worthwhile for them in terms of time and money, but also very worthwhile for us as fans, because it's something we would love to see. Now, if they did do it, I have a feeling it would be a film, because I don't think they'd want to make it overly complicated, because we don't really have a lot of content on it to begin with. So I think they would have to essentially make it a film, and J.K. Rowling would have to sort of pull everything together that she has and then write the rest of it. For number 3, we have the most anticipated one for all fans, I think, and that is the Marauders. Now, to an extent, I expect the Marauders to be explored within the core series, within season 3 and also season 5, so that is Prisoner of Azkaban and Order of the Phoenix, and to sort of delve into their background a little bit. But if they did make a Marauders spin-off, which I definitely think would have to be a series, because I think you would need to break it down into seasons, I think that they could do so much more. And it would also really help with the main debate in the community at the moment over Snape's skin colour in the series, because because they're worried that when we go back to the scene, the flashback of James bullying Snape, it's going to look racist, because for us as muggles, racism is based on skin colour and ethnicity and background. But in the wizarding world, it is important to note that racism is based on blood status only, which is why the racism we saw in Harry Potter was actually between Draco and Hermione when he was calling her a mudblood. But you have to remember that your audience are muggles. So I think if they did do a Marauders spin-off series, they could really build up the background and make it not seem that one isolated scene so bad, because it would explain it was constant bullying, but it was bullying because James didn't like Snape versus because James didn't like a characteristic of Snape as such. Does that make any sense? I also think it'd be really nice to expand on Snape and Lily, as that is the whole reason that Harry got as far in life as he did, because of Snape's love for Lily. I don't think he would have got further without that. And there is also a lot of love out there for Snape and for the darker sort of Slytherin characters as well. And this leads me on to, within the Marauders, something that I think they could expand on, but I don't know if they'd make it a separate series or make it the Marauders series. And that is the Malfoy, the Black family, and also the Sacred 28. Hear me out. I think there is a lot to be said for the Black and Malfoy family discourse, because, you know, we had Andromeda, she ended up marrying out of the Sacred 28, and that was a bad thing. And we also obviously had Lucius building up his ideals at the time, him marrying Narcissa, and I think it'd be really nice to give our main characters family history for us to watch, because I also know a lot of people love Sirius and also his brother Remus that we didn't see in the original series too. So I just think going into that backstory would also make us love our Marauders characters so much more. This leads me on to the Order of the Phoenix, because they could go with Marauders in terms of the time that they were at school, but they could also lead it on to the Order of the Phoenix and basically everything that happens right up until Harry's parents are killed. And I think this would be really good because, as we saw with Game of Thrones, prequels work, especially when they explain what's happening in the main core series. And as we know with HBO, they're planning to reach more audience members, younger audience members, and so I think a prequel would work also for younger audience members who maybe aren't all into the lore just yet, while also pleasing us as older fan base, as the older fan base, you know. So I think that's a really good idea. And I also think we then get to see Neville's parents, which I personally have a massive soft spot for Neville. So I would love to see a bit of his backstory and the courage. And if you know, you know, Neville was also possibly going to be the chosen one. So it would be nice for them to explore that a little bit, possibly within an Order of the Phoenix spin-off. And now, before we get into my next one, I'm going to just touch on a series that I don't think they will do, but I would like to see them do. And this is where I said back when I was talking about Fantastic Beasts, bear with me. I would love for them to explore wizarding cultures in different areas of the world, because I think that is so important for fans to be able to see themselves in the Harry Potter fandom. For me personally, I'm very lucky because obviously I am from England, so I relate very heavily to Hogwarts. But if you're from somewhere else, you know, you want to know about the school you would be going to. Now, this is where I think it could be a little bit fuzzy, and the reason I don't think they'll do it is because it is a little bit more niche, but I think it would make a lot of money, particularly if they focused on, yes, an American school, but also an Asian school, because I know many people in Japan absolutely love Harry Potter, and I think it would be great for them to know a little bit about the school that they would be going to and get to visualize that as well. And even if they did it in some sort of Triwizard tournament way, of different Triwizard tournaments they've had between different schools, I think it would be really interesting to see the way that other wizards live across the globe. Even to see maybe some, like, how they live in Australia, how they live in the Pacific Islands, how they live in Africa, how they live in Antarctica or like northern Canada, you know. I think it'd be very, very interesting. So that is my one that I would love them to do, but I don't think they will do it. And that leads me on to my last one, and that is the Rise of Voldemort. This one would be very, very juicy. I also do think there is a market for it. Once again, so many people love to see the dark side. That's why with Disney, there's so many villains that people love, because we always hear about the protagonist. We want to hear a little bit about the evil side. With this one, I think there's a lot of areas it could focus on, and this is where it kind of links to the Marauders and the Sacred 28 and all of that. But I think we'd love to see a little bit of backstory for Tom Riddle's family, and I think they would have to add that in because that's the core of who he is as a person, the fact he was conceived under a love potion. And then I think obviously we'd have to see his time at the orphanage, but probably not too much because, as you know, you don't want to get too into that sadistic mindset, especially when it's portraying him bullying and kind of hurting other children. So I think that would be a bit of a touchy one, but they'd have to be careful with it, and his possible search for the diadems, and then him coming back to curse the defense against the dark arts position. And I think that would really set up the core series very nicely as well, because we know it's cursed. It would just be great to see like the build up to that. I also think we need to see how Tom Riddle goes from Tom Riddle to full-fledged Voldemort. And I think visually, for a lot of fans, we'd love to see like his breakdown, well, I would at least, of him going from looking like a human to him going to looking like a reptile. But yeah, with Voldemort, I do think it'd be really interesting to see that whole timeline. I'd also love to see him get Nagini, and even if we got to see a little bit of his behind the scenes time when he wasn't really fully human, maybe at the end we could see like some visuals out of his eyes as well. I think that would be very, very interesting. What's your opinion on that? What do you think would be HBO's top topic for a spin-off, and what would be your top topic for a spin-off? Although I may not have said it, please let me know your own ones as well, because I find them so interesting. I'm so immersed in the Harry Potter world. I absolutely love finding out more angles and directions they could go in. So let me know that down in the comments below. Once again, if you want more HBO series videos or even deep dives into the Harry Potter world, go and check out our channel. There's videos from me at Spellbuzz all about HBO, and there's also videos about Quentin Pendragon, and they're all about Harry Potter and the Harry Potter lore and the Harry Potter world. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe. But that's all from me today. Bye bye now.